Good evening. Thank you for joining us for another of our teleart online lectures. Before we begin, I should like to let you know that the Atelier at Flowerfield's Winter 3 session starts next week. We are offering 2 new online classes in digital painting, as well as a new studio art class in botanical illustration. More information about the classes can be found on our website, theatelier@flowerfield.org. Tonight's lecture is being sponsored by First Republic Private Wealth Management, and we thank them very much for their generosity. Our guest lecturer is Elizabeth Fusco, who will be teaching our botanical illustration class, which starts next Monday. The lecture is titled Fascination with Flowers. I will now hand over to Elizabeth Fusco, and thank you for joining us.
Okay, thank you, Gabby. Hello, everyone, and thank you to the Atelier for having me do this presentation, and thank you all for joining us. So just to give you a little background, 1 second, let me just share my screen. So just a little background on myself. I've been drawing and painting for most of my life. Started with oils. I painted landscape and flowers and oils. And one day I went to an exhibit and I saw this most beautiful watercolor botanical painting. And I thought to myself, oh, that's so beautiful. I want to be able to paint like that. So I looked for where I could take courses to paint botanical illustration. And I found the New York Botanical Garden in the Bronx. So being an avid gardener, this was right up my alley. And I took the 3-year, well, it took me 3 years to complete the course and found my love of botanical art. So what is botanical art? So a quote from Wilfred Blunt, who's the author of The Art of Botanical Illustration, which is a brief history. He says, the greatest flower artists have been those who have found beauty in truth, who have understood plants scientifically, but who have yet seen and described them with the eye and hand of the artist. So botanical art and plants and flowers obviously have been around for hundreds and thousands of years. They've even been sketched and scratched into the caves. But the oldest known work for studying plants was from the Greek botanist Pandora Sellers. He was an ancient herbalist, and he was one of the first people to study plants that we know of. And he created an herbal. And an herbal is a book that contains the name and descriptions of all kinds of plants and flowers with their properties and virtues, what they were used for. But it really wasn't until after the Renaissance and the 17th century, basically, that a botanical artist would really be revered and respected and reach the level of respect by being hired by wealthy patrons. So this is the actual copy of the Dioscorides. This is the Vienna Dioscorides. So this was, let me go back to my first page, sorry. So the Vienna Dioscorides manuscript, well, the original one was recorded between 50 and 70 CE. Pandora Sellers is considered the father of pharmacology. He practiced during the time of Nero. He was a surgeon in the Roman army. He wrote 5 volumes of this particular manuscript, and each volume was based on its own subject. For example, one would be for just plants, one would be for animals. This was named De Materia Medica, which this phrase is still used in medicine today. It's the branch of medicine that focuses on medicines and drugs and the use of drugs for illnesses. And the actual whereabouts of this first manuscript is unknown, and it is also unknown whether it has ever been illustrated or not. So the Vienna Dioscorides was a copy of the original. And this one does have images. This Vienna Discoides is an illustrated manuscript. It's actually considered to be the oldest manuscript version of the original. This was written in 512 CE, and it's held in the Austrian National Library in Vienna. This book also has 5 volumes, and it's been translated into many languages, Arabic and Latin. And look at the picture on the left, you can see there's a man who appears to be a doctor, and he's mixing up some sort of elixir with the plants, and that is clearly translated into Arabic. And the picture on the right is also a plant, very carefully described with its root system and flowers and branches and thorns. So the beginning of botanical art was very scientific, and people were illustrating plants for basically the purpose of medicinal and for physicians. The Vienna Discoides was created during the Byzantine Empire's reign in Constantinople for the Princess Anicia Juliana. And also you can see very accurate descriptions of some birds. You can see there's a little owl. So there was a lot of information illustrated and written in these books. For 1500 years, it was used by physicians and pharmacists as the be-all and end-all book for all kinds of medicines. And there's about 600 images in this book and about 1,000 different medicines and elixirs made from them. And also, actually, in this book, there's the oldest known portraits of scientists ever recorded. So now we move to a little bit later on, 1410. This herbal, also an herbal, written by Benedetto Rino. He was the scientist and the botanist who created the herbal, but was not a skilled artist. He had an artist named Andrea Amadeo, who painted, and actually the poppy painting on the left, you may have even seen, it's very famous. It's been around for years. It's been printed and reprinted. But back at that time, the purpose of these herbals and illustrations were, again, for scientific purposes. So the artist never really got any recognition. He was actually kind of unknown, but it was used for doctors and physicians to know which plants they were picking. You could go out into the forest or the wherever you're getting your medicinals from, and know just by looking at the illustration if you're picking the correct plant. This book is actually saved in St. Mark's Church in Venice. So even though Italy saw some really wonderful, beautiful artists, especially during the Renaissance, most of the really well-known botanical artists did not come from Italy. They were coming from Northern Europe. So now we have the fathers of modern botany, Otto Brunfels and Leonhard Fuchs. So they also were very skilled at scientifically illustrating a plant for purposes of medicinal plants and elixirs. Otto studied theology. He became a schoolmaster, and then he was a physician in Bern in Germany. And you'll see a lot of these botanists were also doctors. They studied all kinds of science, and not just the science of the plants, but they were studying exactly what these plants could do as health purposes. And Leonhard Fuchs, let's go to the woodcuts. So Otto, if you see these 2 woodcuts, meaning he would take a block of wood, draw the design, carve it out so it could be then used to make prints. But the plants described are very, very accurate. You can see he's using the root system and the leaves and the stems and showing the front of the flower. and very well described. The second one on the pasque flower, you can also see the flower in many different growth patterns, the bud, the full flower, and using the root system also, and very detailed, highly accurate. And they would create the woodcuts, and another unknown artist would paint them and color them. But again, the artists were not the ones that were being, they were not the important ones. The scientists that were actually drawing the images were held in very high esteem. Fuchs was credited for creating one of the most important herbals in 1543, and he wrote and published. He was also a doctor and a botanist. And a little side note, he was the one who the American fuchsia plant was named after. And that's pretty funny considering it's an American native plant, and he would have never, but they named after him. He also became very well known for his successful treatment of plague victims in Prague. So Brunfels also published writings on education, on the Arabic language, pharmaceuticals, botany, and he wrote an herbal. I'm not going to try to pronounce the German name because it's a little difficult, but there were 135 original woodcuts, all very detailed, all accurate, realistic representations of live plants. So this beautiful garden is the Botanical Garden of Pisa. So early in the Renaissance, gardens became very, very important, not just for the beauty, but this was another way for scientists to study plants. The Botanical Garden of Pisa was established in 1543 by a botanist, of course, and a physician. Luca Ghini is his name, and it's the oldest botanical garden in the world. There's also a museum that was established by Ferdinand de' Medici, and in the museum there is portraits of some of the most famous scientists and some tools that were used by botanists up until the 1800s. So everybody knows Leonardo da Vinci, but we really know him for his Mona Lisa and his portraits and all his other paintings. But most of us know that Leonardo da Vinci was a scientist above all else. He studied physics, he created all kinds of crazy machines and studied anatomy. He did autopsies, and this is how he studied everything. But he also did study plants. So this is his bramble study, which is red chalk on pink prepared paper. So again, although the Renaissance did not put forth too many botanical artists, they were still fascinated with plants and wanted to learn a little bit more. But he very carefully described in such detail. You can see the leaves and the berries of this fruit and the branches. And this second drawing is the wood anemone. And again, he's showing the flower in different views, the back of it, which botanical artists still do today. So the many different views will show you how the flower is attached to the stem, then the front view, and you can see the whole inside of the plant with the stamens and the bud. And he's very accurately described the leaves. This is a pen and ink on paper. And these drawings, this one and that one, are in the Windsor Castle Royal Collection. So this is one of my favorite artists, Albrecht Durer. Maybe some of you have heard of him. He also would have been very fascinated with flowers. He grew up in Nuremberg in Germany. And at that time, Nuremberg was famous for its gardens. And he might have even been an avid gardener himself. This painting was done with gouache on vellum. So vellum is calfskin, and a lot of artists were using vellum back at that time. They would use parchment, which is sheepskin, to write manuscripts and illuminated manuscripts, but calfskin, the vellum they used for manuscripts also, but mostly for painting. So I love this painting because you can see every vein on the leaves and the way he created almost a circular composition out of something so ordinary. And you can see the leaves are in such a natural view. Some are foreshortened, some are in the back. He has an underneath side of one of the leaves, so you could see what it looks like from underneath. And the little tiny delicate blades of grass. And this is called Tuft of Cowslips. And another one by Albrecht Durer, Das Grossrasenstück, probably not my best German accent, but translated, this is called The Big Tuft of Lawn, or the big piece of lawn. And that's exactly what you see when you look at it. It looks like this could be in your lawn, but it almost looks like a photograph to me. And he also, in this one, something so ordinary, you can see dandelion weeds and you can see the little blades of grass and all other weeds, but it's so beautifully rendered in its natural setting in a big clump of dirt, but so delicate, and every blade of grass is facing a different way, and the depth of the painting is just incredible. So Maria Sebilla Marion, she was really a pioneer. She was one of the first few women scientists and entomologists. She was studying bugs way before anybody else knew what bugs were. And actually at that time when she was studying bugs, most people thought that insects just magically appeared out of the dirt. And she studied them very carefully. She had a whole collection of caterpillars, and she watched how they morphed from the larva into the cocoon and into a butterfly. And this is one of her paintings that show not just the plant, but she was also very interested in showing how the insect would live on the host plant, and showed the whole cycle, the life cycle of the insect, how it's eating the little leaves. First it's a larva, and then you can see how it transforms all the way up to the butterfly. When she was living in the Netherlands, and that's where she was born, and she had the travel bug, and she wanted to look for exotic specimens of bugs and plants. So she and her daughter Dorothea traveled to South America, where she could spend some time gathering all these exotic specimens to do her studies on. So that was in 1698. So she spent 2 years there in Suriname and collected bugs and plants and did all her studies and created this beautiful manuscript called the Metamorphosis Insectorum, Surinamesium. And this was all of the information that she gathered while she was there living in Suriname, which was a Dutch republic at the time. So some of her original work is in the British Museum and the Royal Library at Windsor Castle. When Maria passed away, her daughter Dorothea continued her legacy. She was asked to come to St. Petersburg, Russia, and she worked as a scientific illustrator for the Tsar at the time, and she also became the first woman to be employed by the Russian Academy of Sciences. This is another one of Maria's beautiful works of art. Again, she's showing the branch, it's called Branch of Indian Cherry with Achilles Morpho Butterfly from 1702. Again, she's showing, you can see some of those little leaves on the bottom the caterpillar already ate. And then it turned into this beautiful morpho butterfly. But she's not only just showing the front of the butterfly, she's showing the underside of the wings, which describes it in total, because most of the time butterflies' wings are a different pattern on the top from the bottom. So Paul Herman was, again, a Northern European artist. He was the first European botanist to visit Cape of Good Hope in South Africa. And he also did traveling, and a lot of these artists wanted to find different plants and animals and species to study because, you know, this would have brought back more information to their country. So he brought back a lot of tropical plants. And if you see this plant on the right, it's a Ceylon. And this is what his claim to fame was, because he studied something that was never been studied before. And you can see on the left, his plant, I believe this is some sort of a lily, but he's also showing again the bulb, and a little more artistically than seen before. He's got the leaf wrapped around the stem and showing a little bit more artistic in an artistic way. And if you look carefully in the bottom left, you can see how he's labeling his plant. And we'll talk about that a little later. He wrote some beautiful manuscripts and passed them through many hands, but they ended up in the Swedish botanist's hands, Linnaeus. And I'll get to that in a second. But Herman became the director of the Leiden Botanical Garden from 1680 to 1695. And if anyone knows anything about the Leiden Botanical Garden, that's where you'll find the most amazing array of tulips. It's the oldest botanical garden in the Netherlands, built in 1590. And Carlaeus, who was a French botanist, grew the first largest tulip collection in Europe. And Philip Franz von Siebold, he was a German physicist and botanist. He introduced about 700 exotic plants from Japan and China. So Carl Linnaeus, so he's the one who ended up with Paul Herman's manuscript. And he was a scientist also, and he studied botany and medicine and zoology. He's the scientist that formalized the binomial nomenclature, meaning that every organism was given the two names, ordering them in the taxonomy, named and identified and classified every organism. So even plants have their taxonomy, and this is just a quick little chart of how that's done, and it's still done today by botanical artists. When you paint something or draw something, you want to be scientific about your illustration. So you first name your family. So this is for the Magnolia grandiflora. Of course, there's a common name that we call our flowers by, but then there's always the Latin name, and the family is always italicized. And then the genus is capitalized, but the rest is lowercase. The species, which there's always thousands of different species of something, is the lowercase letter. And then you can give the variety or the cultivar single quotes. So that was due to Linnaeus. He created this whole order, and it's not just for plants, it's for animals and fish and everything else under the sun. And you can see in this slide, Thomas Martin, who was also a botanist. He was born in Cambridge and was a professor of botany at Cambridge University for 63 years. He actually followed in his father's footsteps. His father was the first, before him was the professor of botany, and he passed on his job down to his son Thomas, which I guess you could do that back in those days. You inherited a position. But in 1799, he published 38 plates. And this photo right here is considered a plate, a botanical plate, with explanations. And he illustrated the plant system. And if you look closely at this slide, he's showing the whole plant, not just the flower. He's showing the ovary and the stamens and the stigma and all of the reproductive organs of the flower in various stages of opening, So he was really interested in illustrating what the plant looked like if you dissected it. So a lot of botanical artists still do botanical plates. They would draw their flower in various phases of opening, and then maybe start with the seed and build up to the mature plant. And here we have Pierre Joseph Redute. He is by far the most well-known botanical artist. He was born in 1759 and died in 1840. He's known as the Raphael of flowers and the Rembrandt of roses. So even if you've never heard his name, you've probably seen some of his work because it's so world known and it's printed on so many things, from towels and sheets and dishware, and actually his designs are on, I forgot the name of the china, but it's a china pattern that you can still buy, but it's very, very expensive. So he was highly respected and very well paid. Born in Belgium, he left home at 13 years old to go to Paris and worked with his brother creating art. His brother, I think, was a set designer, and he helped with his brother, but then he took on the passion of painting flowers. And he became so well known that Queen Marie Antoinette hired him to paint some flowers for her. And then he became Empress Josephine's personal flower painter. He perfected the stippling technique in his artwork, and he also perfected a color printing technique. His early work was a little more scientific, but then I'll show you how he changed from scientific to just really amazing artwork. His work was so well known that King Charles X bought one of his original watercolors for 30,000 francs. I'm not sure how much that would be today, but 30,000 francs back then was an awful lot of money. So this is a picture of Malmaison, which was the Empress Josephine's castle. And she bought this in 1799. And of course, every wealthy person and of noble character had to have the most elaborate gardens. That was so important. She spent so much time bringing in exotic plants, and not only that, but she had a little park where she had all these exotic animals that she brought in from all over the world. So he was working on her flowers in the garden and created 120 plates. Again, that's would be the whole photo of the particular flower, in a publication called The Garden of Malmaison. And I think that book you can still buy, it's still in publication. And she urged him to really study roses. She was obsessed with roses and she wanted all her flowers painted. And she felt that that would bring him fame and fortune, and she was 100% right. So Josephine brings in all these exotic plants from all over the world, and because she's obsessed with roses, she brings in about 250 species of roses. And Redute does an amazing job in painting her roses. So here is two of his paintings. And you can see they are scientifically accurate, but now he's gone beyond that and creating them more as a work of art. So he was very lucky to have connected with Josephine because she was a very wealthy patron. And if it wasn't for her and her being able to sponsor him publishing his book, he might not have been so well known. So at that time, you had to be sponsored by a patron. All artists had to be sponsored by a patron, whether it was a court or a noble person or somebody very wealthy or the Catholic Church. They were all patrons of the art. And if you were able to get somebody to sponsor you and they were your patron, you could make a name for yourself as an artist. This is one of his earlier works, and you can see the difference. It's more scientific. You can see on the bottom, it's more of a scientific plate, and he's illustrating the bud in various forms of growth. And then towards the right, you can see the teeny tiny little seed. And this flower, the Pelargonium crispum, is in the geranium family or in the same family as a geranium. And you might be able to recognize the leaves a little bit. And then we have his later work from 1811, which is just exquisite. And this iris is painted using the stippling effect that I talked about a little while ago. Most artists, when you draw, you're using a line, and you can create a fairly good drawing using a line. The stippling effect that he did on copper plates was totally different. He's using a stylus with a teeny tiny tip, and he's creating this drawing with all teeny tiny little dots. So you can imagine how long it must have taken him to do this. But this is not the only one that he did. This is part of a whole collection that he created, 8 volumes called Liliaceae, which was all in the lilac family, but lily family, sorry, 503 plates. So he did all of them using that stippling effect. So now we have the Bauer brothers with just a picture of Franz. His brother Ferdinand never had a portrait taken that we know of, but they were also both botanic artists. They came from a very artistic family. Their father was a court painter. Franz, as you can see, he's dressed really royally, like somebody special, because he was. He became the hired resident artist for Kew Gardens in England, and he was hired by Sir Joseph Banks. He made a very nice salary, had a very nice life. He actually was able to choose what was going to go in the garden. He had a big say-so in what was going to be planted there. On the other hand, his little brother wanted to see the world and travel, which he did, but he went all over Europe and Africa and different parts of the world. And not only did he paint, Ferdinand, flowers, he also painted animals and birds and all different things besides plants. They were not as well known as Redute, even though they were about the same time period, because their work was not published. They did a very extensive work, which now you can find, but at that time they were hired by wealthy people who kept their collection in their own private homes. So this is one of Franz Bowers' watercolors, beautiful lady slipper orchid. Again, scientific in that it's showing every vein on the leaf, the root system of the orchid. Everything is very accurate, but also now we're seeing that they're putting in their artistic style in these beautiful botanical artworks. And this was one from Ferdinand Bauer. And again, very beautifully done, more of a botanical plate because he's showing the separate leaf and the seed and the bud separately, so you can see it more in a scientific way. And this is called Digitalis Purple. And maybe some of you have heard of Digitalis. It's made into heart medicine. We know it as foxglove, but some of you may have heard of the medicine Digitalis. So now we're heading towards some more contemporary artists. These are artists of the 21st century. Rory McEwen, who was born in Scotland in 1932 and passed away in 1982. I just love this painting because it looks like a little animated person to me. The way he puts it on the blank page and focuses all of the energy right into that beautiful purpley blue flower. He was considered one of the greatest painters of tulips since the Dutch masters of the 17th century. And one of his tulip paintings actually is hanging in the White House. it said that an anonymous donor bought one of his paintings and gifted it to Jackie Kennedy in 1963. So his distinctive style, he uses a large background. He also considered his flowers a flower portrait or a plant portrait, but he executed them in such complete detail and accuracy and such skill, but also so beautiful, the way he composed and painted his flowers. He also painted watercolor on vellum. He was not only just a skilled artist, but he was also a very renowned musician. He and his brother toured all around the world, and he played 12-string guitar, and he and his brother sang Scottish folk songs. He was actually on the Ed Sullivan Show. Now we have Pandora Sellers, another UK artist. She was also very instrumental in pushing botanical art to high quality. She was born in 1936 and died just recently in 2017. So this is her water lily painting, and you can see how much depth in the composition by putting so many leaves behind another leaf, but accurately showing the different stages of the leaf curling and opening, and the water lily also showing it in a bud form, various stages of the growth of the plant. She has a lot of her work in Kew Gardens. It's in their permanent collection. She did illustrations for the Kew Botanical Magazine, and she worked as a freelance artist and did a lot of work for, commissioned work for a lot of horticulturists. So I wanted to show this Gardens of Alcatraz. Many of you may have heard of Alcatraz as the prison, but some of you may not know that Alcatraz was once and now again a beautiful garden. So Alcatraz is in San Francisco, and it basically was a big giant rock. They didn't even have any soil. They had to bring in tons of soil to cover the rock. When it was a military prison in 1861, and then the prisoners began a garden in 1920, in the 1920s. And they felt that this was very therapeutic for the prisoners. They spent a lot of time outside getting fresh air. They really couldn't go anywhere, so they were able to stay outside and garden. And the workers, the warden, and the corrections officers all lived on the island. So they created vegetable gardens and rose gardens, but then it went all into disarray in 1963 when the prison closed down. So in 2003, then it became a national park now. So it's the National Park Service, along with the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy. They began to restore the garden. And then in 2013, they started a florilegium. So a florilegium is where a group of botanical artists will come in and study, each artist will study one particular plant or flower and paint it, draw it, and then it will be exhibited and displayed so that there's a total record of the flowers that are on the premises. And florilegiums are done all over the world. And this florilegium was created by the Northern California Society of Botanical Artists in collaboration with the Garden Conservancy. And they had a beautiful exhibit in 2017. They chose 45 artists from a jury. I picked these 3 because they're my favorites. Martha McLaren painted this beautiful paperwhite, and Ellen Hyun Hugh too created this beautiful butterfly bush, and Judy Paris painted this beautiful hollyhock. So they had this exhibit in the prisoners' band rehearsal room, but I happened to be there and see that beautiful exhibit, and just incredible amount of work. So now we have the New York Botanical Garden in the Bronx. This is where I actually took my course. There's probably 9 places, I think, in the United States where you can actually take the certification course. There might be places where you can take workshops, but like I said in the beginning, I had been enamored by these watercolor paintings of flowers. And once I found that the botanical gardens in the Bronx had the whole program, uh, that's what I wanted to do. It took me 3 years, but the course was well worth it. I learned every formal medium that they use for traditional botanical art. They teach pen and ink, watercolor, color pencil, graphite, um, plant morphology, where you're actually learning about the reproduction of the plants and the different families. So it was a really amazing course, and I'm so glad that I did it. The New York Botanical Garden is 250 acres. It was established in 1881. I don't know if any of you have been there, but it's well worth the trip. Um, it is considered a national landmark, actually. So for 3 years, I went here, not every day, but not a bad place to go. It's always beautiful and just so many beautiful flowers and plants to look at. And this is just a little bit of the information about the American Society of Botanical Artists and the Society of Botanical Artists, which is based in the UK. They started in 1984, and then the American Society of Botanical Artists started in 1994. And this is a cover of the magazine that the members get once a month. So the American Society of Botanical Artists, even though it says American, there's members from all over the world. And every year, except for this year, obviously, because of COVID, they have a conference, and we've had them in Chicago, San Francisco, Missouri, where else? I'm all over the country. And I try to go because it's an amazing opportunity to meet with other botanical artists. Usually they get about 300 people from Australia, Singapore, India, France, all over the world. And it's really, really so incredible that all these artists come for this conference, and they share their knowledge. You can take workshops, which I always do because I think it's really important to just keep learning and keep growing as an artist. So I've been very fortunate to take a lot of these workshops with amazing artists from all over the world. It usually is like a 4-day conference with, you know, lots of fun, but also lots of learning. And this is one of my favorite paintings of my own, Lilium lancifolium, tiger lily, which I painted in 2017. It's watercolor on paper. This tiger lily is also very special to me. I grew this from seeds that my mother-in-law gave me from her garden. So the seeds have gone from one house to another house and then to my house. So I didn't cut this flower to bring it in as a specimen, but I stood in my garden for days just sketching and drawing the plant in different stages. This was submitted to Filoli Gardens in San Francisco and won the Roth Award for Botanical Distinction in 2017. And last but not least, I'm just going to show a little bit of a work in progress and show you how I actually start up one of my paintings. I always draw from life and use a live subject. It's impossible to get an accurate description of a plant or a flower from just a photo reference. I do take photos to keep them, you know, handy for reference, but you need to have the live subject in front of you so you can accurately measure and draw and match the color. So this is a curled up, beautiful leaf that I found. It's from a princess tree, and the seed pods on the table next to it. And you can see that I've really drawn a detailed drawing on tracing paper. And then with that tracing paper, I would take and transfer that to the watercolor paper. And I would start out with some washes and then just keep building up with my teeny tiny little number 1 or number 2 watercolor brush until it gets to the point where it's a finished painting. And those are my sources. And that's about it. So if anybody wants to start asking any questions.
So far, it's been pretty quiet.
Okay. Well, I hope everyone.
Annette Napolitano raised a hand.
Okay.
I just allowed her to talk, so if she'd like to say something.
Sure.
I have, like, I don't know if it's a good question or not, but you had said in the beginning of the talk that they would paint on vellum, that the Durer was painted on vellum, which was calf skin.
Correct.
And then later on, you said that the guy's name was McEwen, and his painting was on vellum. Was that paper vellum, or was that?
No. A lot of artists, botanical artists, still actually use calf skin. There's a company called Pergamena that still makes calf skin vellum today, and a lot of artists still use that.
What is the texture like? Is it very is it very smooth, or is it like bumpy, like regular watercolor paper?
Yeah, no, this is not a dumb question at all. Most people don't really know. Vellum can be different textures. You can get some that's very smooth and has been treated. I'm not really 100% sure how they treat it, but there's a whole process in Kelmscott vellum is the smoothest. And I actually have tried painting on a piece of Kelmscott, and it's really smooth, almost like you're painting on how can I describe it? Almost like a glass plate.
Yeah.
Very smooth. But then there's other types of vellum that are not that smooth and have more little texture in it. And some artists actually like that. They like to have that texture in their work.
Thank you.
Good question.
Okay, we have another one. Joan Cooper. Hello, Joan. Oh, okay. I'm afraid we cannot allow talk. She's using an older version of Zoom. I apologize for that. Okay, so we have someone in the chat room. Let's see. Okay, the question from Linda Vlay is, what will you teach in your class?
So the first class, I think we're going to paint a tulip. I think that's one of the lesser complicated flowers, but we will draw it. It's a 4-week program, so we are going to spend some time learning how to see and measure and draw, and then transfer onto watercolor paper and really do the whole process that I do when I'm painting something. And then we'll probably spend the 3 weeks, maybe the first week of drawing, and then the next 3 weeks of painting.
And just so you know, that class still has some places available. So if anyone does want to sign up, please check our website. You can sign up online, or you can call us at 631-250-9009. We would love to have you on board.
And it's just a small group, right, Gabby? And
yes, it's a small group. We have a maximum of 6 to remain safe. So right now we have, I think, 3 or 4 people signed up. So we do still have some places. It looks like we have a few more hands up. Let me see. Kathy Tirano. Go ahead, please.
Kathy?
Hi, I think I had my hand up by accident. I actually don't have a question ready.
Okay, I'll move on to the next one. Let's try Joan Cooper again. Let's see if we can get you. No, I'm afraid I can't get you on board. I'm afraid, Joan. Okay, Julie Doxey.
maybe Joan can write her comment or
Yes,
question.
you can put it into the chat room. Okay, Julie Doxy. Okay, you can speak. She's still there? No. Okay, Linda Vlay. Let's see. I'll allow her to. Okay, Linda, you can talk.
Oh, hi, I just had a question about brushes.
Yes.
What kind of brushes do you use?
So I use Winsor Newton or Raphael. They're Kolinsky sable brushes. I use a number 4 is probably the biggest one that I use. And then I use a number 2 and a number 1. So they're not very big brushes. I work very slowly and carefully, and it does take a pretty long time, but it gives you more control.
So these are watercolor sable brushes?
Mhm.
Okay, I have just a message from Liz, from Sylvia Maria. She says, Liz is an amazing teacher. I have taken several classes with her.
Thank you, Sylvia. Yes, I have. She's an amazing artist also, actually.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Sylvia? I said she's also an amazing artist.
Julie Doxy is asking a question. What medium did the early botanical artists use beside the painted woodcuts?
They used gouache a lot, which is an opaque watercolor, and they did use watercolor. A lot of them also used pen and ink, and they did a whole drawing with pen and ink or graphite.
Okay, let's see. Do we have any more? Let's have a look. Okay, Barbara Sons.
Mhm.
Your tiger lily painting is beautiful. Beautiful. What did it win?
It won the Roth Award for Botanical Distinction. Thank you, Barbara Sans.
Does anyone have any more questions? You can put it in the chat room, or you can try raising your hand again. Anyone else? No? Okay, that seems like we're done with the chat.
Okay.
Okay, so we would like to thank Elizabeth for a very interesting lecture. I hope you all enjoyed it.
I hope
Oh, hang on. Looks like we have, wait a minute, do we have another one? Joan Kenwood. Okay, go ahead. Hold on, let me just allow you to talk 1 minute. Okay, go ahead, Joan. Hello? I think maybe she's left. No, unfortunately, yeah, we can't do that. All right.
Okay, I'm on. Can you hear me?
You're on? Yes. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, your water lily is beautiful. And I'm so sorry that I wasn't able to get on when I was supposed to. So I apologize for that, but could you explain more about the class? I know that it's 4 weeks. I just heard that. When does it start? What night is it on? How much is it?
So it starts on Monday, and you can contact the atelier for all of the other information, but the first class is Monday, March 1st.
Yeah, March 1st. I believe it's 1:30 to 4:30.
Oh,
And it runs for 4 weeks, and the cost of the class is 240.
okay.
And you can sign up online through the website, theatelier@flowerfield.org, or you can call us at 631-250-9009. And anyone can sign you up if you wish to do so.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Let's see. Anyone else? No, I think that's it. Oh, wait a minute. We can have a couple more chats. Let's see. No, I think we've run through all of those. Okay, I think we have pretty much covered it.
Okay.
Right. So thank you very much for a wonderful lecture. I hope everyone enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Our next lecture is actually going to be on March 18th, and that's moving moving on, Lee Krasner's work in Jackson Pollock's studio. So look out for the email for that. We would also like to thank First Republic Private Wealth Management again for their generous sponsorship of tonight's program, and they actually are sponsoring future programs as well. So again, thank you very much. And I would wish you all a very good night. Thank you so much.